Hey everybody, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Teri Hunter. I'm an intuitive astrologer and I'm here today because I want to talk about Pluto's influence on the nodes. Pluto is currently squaring the nodes, and over the summertime, we are going to be feeling a series, almost like a set of waves of energy as Mars, at the end of its transit in Cancer, is going to begin in opposition to Pluto, and Venus will be following that energy very quickly. So I think this is very powerful, and I think this is one of the most dynamic influences of 2023, and there are many dynamic influences. So what I want to do today is really talk about things in generality. I'm not going to be addressing readings for each sign because this is a grand or a fixed grand square that is going to be influencing us. So it's more of an axis than it is reflective in a house. So if you're looking in your own natal chart, you're going to want to look for where your fixed houses are. For me as an Aries rising, that's going to be my second house, Taurus. It's going to be my fifth house of Leo. It's going to be my eighth house of Scorpio, and it's going to be my 11th house of Aquarius. So you might want to check that because, again, this transit that's going on feels as if it's like a set of waves in the ocean. And I intentionally picked this background because an opposition is a challenging dynamic. It presents an obstacle, and yet there is the opportunity to create a bridge. And this is the Golden Gate Bridge. There's an opposition to the two land masses, and there we are creating a solution for it. So that is kind of what I think is the theme here. So let me tell you how I look at astrology. I see the planets as characters. I see them as personality traits. I relate to them on a storytelling level versus looking at the aspects and saying, this is happening outside of myself. So as I started to be inspired about this fixed grand cross, I'm sorry, I say cross because I see the T that is created through the square. So it's really a fixed grand square because all the points involved are in fixed energies, which are energies that don't like to move. They don't like to shift. There is they're kind of, each fixed sign is in the middle of a cardinal or a mutable. So it's kind of feels sandwiched in. And sometimes in that sandwiching in, it's like being on an airliner, and you're claiming your space in that middle seat. And you want to make sure that you get an armrest so you can be a little more intentional and a little more intense, and a little more determined. So what I want to do here is I'm going to kind of talk about the energy, about how this will feel, about how it will influence us over this period of time. It's like walking through a pocket of air. I want to call it weather, but it doesn't actually feel like weather. It feels like an environment. It feels like, you've heard the saying, you can walk into a room and cut the tension with a knife. Well, Pluto creates tension. So let me talk a little bit about Pluto because I think this is very interesting. Pluto is considered a dwarf planet, and it's gone back and forth between being a planet and not being a planet. And as I was doing my meditation this morning, I kept seeing Pluto as the character Yoda in Star Wars. Yoda is very wise. Yoda is very small. Yoda is very powerful. And Yoda is willing to and understands about the wisdom that can be extracted within the darkness of the human experience, aka our fears. And Pluto represents a psychology. It represents the deepest platform with which we act upon. It is the underbelly of the underbelly of the underbelly, which is why Pluto rules things like the toxic waste, the plumbing, the things that are in the dark that we can't see on the surface. Now, Pluto I'm sorry, Pluto was rediscovered. I want to say it this way. Let me back up. Pluto was actually discovered in the 1930s by Clyde Tombaugh. And I hope I'm saying that correctly. And what I thought was interesting about the discovery of Pluto is it was discovered actually on February 18th, which is Aquarius. The gentleman the astronomer who discovered him was an Aquarius born on 2/4/1906. I thought this was very, very interesting. Now, in 2015, the New Horizons mission flew by Pluto and discovered that Pluto has a huge heart on the face of the surface. It's comprised of nitrogen ice, and it sort of gives this feeling of this white and blue sort of tealy color. I hope my television the way I see it is correct, but it sort of feels like there's this tumultuous energy underneath the surface of this heart. And this heart, I went and finally looked it up. It is 990 miles wide. That is huge. If you're in kilometers, it's 1,590 miles or kilometers wide. To me, this is very, very powerful because the planet Pluto represents the deepest part of our heart, the part of our heart that we are actually potentially afraid to express because we may not be embraced by others. Now, Pluto in the sign of Aquarius at the 0 degree is giving us a glimpse of what it will be like when Pluto actually moves into Aquarius in 2024 and stays there until 2044. So there will be, and has been for years, as Venus and Mars have been traversing the Zodiac, they've been making oppositions to Pluto. But this is the first time in 248 years that they will be making oppositions to Pluto in Aquarius. This is what I think is so powerful, because I think this is really about building a bridge, looking at the opposition as a very tense conversation. So let me just talk about how I perceive the conversation between Pluto and Mars. And this conversation has already started because Mars is at the late degrees of Cancer. And as it moves into the early degrees of Leo, this influence is still there. So Pluto is saying to Mars, as they are co-rulers of Scorpio, what did you learn about your way of communicating? What did you learn about your passions, Mars, while you were traversing the Zodiac, while you spent 7 months in Gemini? Because now is a time to start to implement those awarenesses, those epiphanies, those observations, and to synthesize them within your human experience. Now, if we think about what Gemini represents, Mars was not only reviewing what it thinks and how it acts, but what is important to Mars in its everyday activities. Now, Mars may have been saying, especially as Mars has been traversing Cancer, I need to protect my home. I need to make sure that everything is safe within my home. And as we get into the later degrees of Cancer and the early degrees of Leo, which represents my heart, what I find fun and interesting, how I process romance, how I process and conceive children, if that's what I want, the child within me. There is a tense conversation going on. It's as if Yoda is talking to Luke Skywalker. Yoda is Pluto, and like Luke Skywalker is Mars. And Pluto is asking Mars to go into the cave of fear and to realize that the only thing you're battling is yourself, the underbelly of resentment you may be holding, the underbelly of anger, the underbelly of giving up on your passions because you haven't seen any results in them and it hasn't happened quick enough for you. This is really a big, this grand fixed cross feels as if it is a karmic point where I get real with myself. because the North Node up in Taurus and the South Node in Scorpio have been talking to Pluto for some time. But as Mars comes into the picture, this is a time of taking action. And the action is about responsibility. It's about the awareness of co-creation. It's about starting to master what your soul knows inherently, that you are a divine being who is here to experience that divinity through your co-creations of passion and excitement and adventure. And that the dutiful, fear-based, security-based scarcity energy is a construct of man, a construct of thousands of years of trying to survive on this planet. And so this is why I think, pardon me as I hit myself in the face, that as Pluto moves and retrogrades back into Capricorn in June, this is where we're continuing to deconstruct, to demolition the thoughts, the processes, the dynamics that have inadvertently held me back. This is not about blaming yourself for not getting over things. This is not about assigning blame somewhere else. It's just an observation that are the dynamics that I'm operating on a deep psychological level, the permissions I give myself to endeavor what's important to me. Am I married to those? Am I aligned to those? Because Jupiter is really big in this whole story, because Jupiter is pulling up onto the North Node. The North Node is in the early degrees of Taurus, and it's at the end of its journey in Taurus, and Jupiter's coming into this sign, and it's at the later degrees of Aries right now. So there's a square between Mars and Jupiter in the later degrees of Aries. I'm sorry, Cancer and Aries. And then there's this opposition to Pluto. And the whole time we have the South Node sitting down here holding up this whole story. Are you going to default to the old ways of being? Are you going to, I hate to say it, give up on what your passions are? Are you going to age out? Are you going to, look at the obstacles in your life? Are you going to criticize yourself into a place of paralyzation? Or will you stretch? Because Jupiter is going to expand and in some ways aggravate the North Node's desire to move the story forward. The North Node is also referred to as Rahu. And in ancient times, Rahu is a ravenous and insatiable, and in some ways, a very Plutonian energy. And when it wants something, it will do anything to get it. So here, as Jupiter is rolling up on the North Node, there is this expanded awareness of your own ideologies, psychologies, religious beliefs that have been aligned or misaligned to your happiness. And so I think that this energy is going to be very, very powerful, because we are going to wake up from our disempowerment. And initially, we may feel more of the challenging energies of, why didn't I do something about this earlier? Or why didn't I know about this? Or I sort of knew about this, or I thought I was over this and I'm not. Because this is really about taking brave action, to sort of letting the chalkboard of your previous story fade to black as you start a new story, and a new story based on the wisdom that you have learned and the wisdom that you have experienced, and the integration of that wisdom. Because now I'm coming up on Venus coming into this idea where now she let me look at my notes real quick, because she starts her opposition to Pluto in June. As she moves into the later degrees of Cancer, and then she's going to, this is in the later part of May and early June, Venus will be starting her opposition to Pluto and her square to the nodes. Now, Venus rules our partnerships. She rules beauty and makeup and food. But here I'm talking about your personal skills, your talents, your gifts, and your sense of self-worth. Because what you believe about your ability to create, what you believe about the bridge and its viability, some people get on a bridge and they jump off it because they can't take the pressure. And some people persevere across the bridge, and there is where the new horizon lies. And that is what this whole summer is about: redefining yourself, or allowing for a redefinition that is more aligned to a deeper truth of what you want for yourself. As I've aged, I'm 63 years old now, I realized that a lot of the platforms I built things on were not really authentic to my happiness, but more about shoving myself in other people's faces. I'm an Aries rising, and I've had a lot of issues with people who didn't believe in me. I'm like, why don't you believe in me? Especially in my family. It seemed like everything I wanted to endeavor to stretch myself, they just wanted to throw, a wet blanket on it and say, well, you can't do that. You're not special enough to do that. That's what Venus is going to talk about with Pluto. How much do you believe that you deserve and to live out your desires? Because the human structure will not really support that at this juncture in human history, which is why we're going through so much demolition, why so many structures and so much anger and so much really acting out violence is bubbling up. I mean, the United States is going through its Pluto return, so there's that to add on to it. And if you think about just the dynamic of the United States going through a Pluto return, it's having a real opposition with all of its Cancer energy and its Leo energy. So I wanted to talk about this today because I think that as you look into your personal charts and you look at what houses does the fixed energy dominate in your personal chart, where, if it's the 4th house and the 10th house and the 1st house and the 7th house, that's the world access. And that would be, looking at that structure will give you an idea of where this will take place within your personal life. And a lot of this energy initially is going to feel like a tidal wave. That's the way I want to put it. I feel like I'm seeing sets of waves coming in, and the first ones I'm not really ready, and I don't know how to dive under them or to traverse them with any ease. But as the waves come and I become more adapted to the energy, I become more fluid, and I don't try to fight Mother Ocean. I rather relax into it so that she can bring me up to the surface. This is what I think is going on, because Pluto, to me, has been ushering in an age where we start to recognize our inherent power of creation, where our mind, and this is the gift of being a human, has the ability to focus in such a way that it is the magical creature that manifests things on this planet. When we listen to the teachings of Abraham, we learn that anything that we concentrate on for 17 seconds or more kicks in the divine law of the universe, the law of attraction. And now the human is going through an experience of learning how to invite in things to come to them, to understand that it's one thing to attract something in, but actually experiencing it is in the hands of your own allowing yourself to take the risk to believe that it's a stable endeavor. There's all sorts of other planetary activity going on. Saturn will retrograde. Saturn will start to make an opposition to Mars when Mars moves into Virgo. And this will be happening while Venus is in the mix with the grand fixed square. So and Virgo is what we are enslaved to. Virgo is also our health. And when we are purporting behaviors or endeavoring things just to pay our bills, it is erosive to our health. And we go through this roller coaster ride of wanting to, escape the boulder of our bills. So sometimes we give up on our dreams for what feels safe and secure. So I think this is a powerful influence. I I'm not really going through all the different degrees right now because this is such a long period of time. For me, this is really in play throughout the whole end of spring and summer, and even creeping a bit into September and October. And that's because Mercury shows up in this mix. But what I want to do is I want to offer you as the audience an opportunity to really dig deeper into where your true currency lies. Is it in your financial body, or is it in your ease and flow, in your own choices of how you want to spend your day? And these astrological dynamics offer you an opportunity to really look deeply at the detail of that. And in doing so, you can start to write the template for where, as you move forward later on in 2024, when Pluto moves into Aquarius for its 20-year stay. And Pluto doesn't stay in every sign 20 years, but it's going to stay in Aquarius 20 years, which is long for this stint. So there's a real, there'll be a jump in technology, of course, but there will be a liberating of the mind. There will be an opportunity for us all to experience our divine genius. And as we become more aware of our thoughts, and rather than villainizing the thoughts that are very human, we embrace them as the opportunities to achieve beyond them, we can be exhilarated. And I do believe that there will be a polarization of humans, those that actually buy into these concepts of the universal laws and start to apply them, those that are brave in their awareness of their own psychological makeup, and rather than condemning themselves, they just use it as a piece of information. And then there will be those that unfortunately fall under the human veil of fear and feel disempowered and disengaged and feel angry and resentful. And I think that using your own intuitive knowing will keep you insulated from this polarization. It'll keep you in the flow. It'll keep you in an awareness that is more of the discoverer, the explorer. Mars is a pioneer. So by nature, Mars is discovering and constantly exploring. And this is a time to explore and discover the power within your own psychological imprint. And while there can be little nooks and crannies, Luke Skywalker was not expecting to see his own face on the ground after he battled Darth Vader. He thought he was battling the enemy, but the enemy was really the fear within him. So as he transformed fear into the platform for his manifestation and exhilaration and achievement and an opportunity to display bravery and heroism, Mars is transformed. And Venus has the same opportunity to allow her voice, her skills to create the comfort and security she longs for and the partnership she longs for. So as Pluto makes this opposition to her, Pluto is going to ask all of us at a deep level, do you value yourself enough to love yourself more than you love what is outside of yourself? Because the human by nature looks outside themselves to determine if they're lovable. And this is another thread in the Aquarian age. And another dynamic, if we think about the people that we hold in esteem, people in the media, there are people like Maya Angelou. She was a woman who'd walked a path that brought her much wisdom, and we revered her wisdom, and we focused on her wisdom, not her path. And if we focused on her path, she may never have gotten to where she was going, which was to represent possibilities through hardship. So I hope you will take this opportunity to redefine what makes you happy. Because what I found out at the end of the day was that a lot of what I wanted to do, to create a huge following, to influence many people and to bring them and uplift them in the world, while all of that is true, there was the underbelly of wanting to show up to the people who didn't believe me and to give them a big bird, And that's really not a strong platform. That's a platform of anger and frustration and not feeling valued. And as I could recognize that in myself, I could shift and say, you know what? I'm going to produce videos that I think are valuable, that I would want to listen to. And this is for my enjoyment and pleasure as I share what I've learned with you. So I think that these planets are like characters. There's a movie which came out, which I think is funny, in 2015. It's called Inside Out. It was a Disney movie about an 11-year-old girl who moved from Minnesota to San Francisco. And she went through a lot of emotions as she had to leave her friends behind and what she was familiar with in order to embark upon a new life. And then throughout the movie, she learns about the different emotions and how each one serves her. And one of the ones that was the most feared was sadness. And yet, by the time we get to the end of the movie, we find a very divine energy within sadness. So I think that is very applicable to what's going on through these transits. Now, at the same time, in 2015 was when this flyby mission discovered Pluto's heart. And it is, it became this focal point of interest and of intrigue. And so I feel as if this is very powerful. Here we have these little bit of alignments. There was another thing I wanted to mention is that there was a contest when Pluto was discovered. And it was an 11-year-old girl who actually named Pluto. And I thought that was rather interesting because the little girl in the movie Inside Out is 11 years old. The movie Inside Out came out in 2015. And that's when the heart was discovered. When Pluto was barely, we'd barely known that Pluto was around, not even 100 years yet, because it was discovered in 1930. So it'll be 100 years in 2030. I don't know. I just find these things, I see these weird threads through things. I have Mercury in Scorpio. So, all right, that's it for this video. This was kind of more of a conceptual video, a storytelling video. But I want you to start to think of the planets as representing parts of your personality. And rather than think of it as the dark and dim and challenging parts, there are some beautiful parts, because Pluto transformed is the thing that creates billionaires. It creates magic. It transforms from the caterpillar to the butterfly. So I know it's going to be a little bit jarring at first, but as you get your water wings, you'll feel more comfortable walking through this transit. So I hope this was helpful. And if you liked it, please hit the subscribe button, the notification bell, like, comment, all those good things. I will be doing a video for Sunday's weekly horoscopes rather than going live this week, because we're going to celebrate Mother's Day on this coming Sunday, May 14th, Mercury going direct. All right, everybody, that's it for me today. Peace out.